Hello, students. We are still talking about agriculture in cultural geography class, and today we're going to transition into the topic called the Green Revolution. And so this is not necessarily what it sounds like, because today in 2023, when we hear about green initiatives, it usually has something to do with electric cars or battery powered motors or solar or something like that. That's not what we're referring to when we couple this phrase, the Green Revolution, with agriculture. And so I'm going to introduce you in this video to some of the concepts that you're going to learn more about in a couple of videos that I curated for you for this week. But the Green Revolution, when we're talking about agriculture, it corresponds to the third agricultural revolution. So we have already talked about subsistence strategies in our class. Those are tactics or plans that an entire culture of people use in order to make sure that they have food, potable water, shelter, that kind of thing. That's what a subsistence strategy is. We've talked about pastoralism, we talked about horticulture, foraging, and agriculture. We're focused on agriculture a whole lot because that's what our modern global society participates in the most. We are connected with other places and other locations in the world based on the agricultural products that we buy or sell to or from them, and vice versa. And so the Green Revolution is talking about, in cultural geography class, refers to another agricultural revolution and a subsistence strategy in general. So the first agricultural revolution that we talked about a week or two ago, of course, centered around that area in the Middle East known as the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers, the Fertile Crescent, along the delta of the Nile River in Egypt. And that was about 6,000, 7,000 years ago, the first agricultural revolution, where people transitioned from just a day-to-day gathering of calories that they needed for themselves and their immediate social group. And instead, surplus could be produced if you harness the area around you and use the natural irrigation and natural fertilizer techniques necessary in order to produce a surplus. And suddenly you don't have just enough for you and your group for this day or this week. You can put food in storage, you can sell food and use it for trade with other people, and it becomes a commodity. You're going to, anytime there's a surplus of something, it can become a commodity. And so that is an economic word that you're going to hear a lot in one of the videos that's curated for you this week when we're talking about food as a commodity. So that was the first agricultural revolution that many years ago. And then corresponding with the Industrial Revolution, which we usually say is about 1750, the year 1750 to 1850 or 1890, that 140 or so year period is the Industrial Revolution that really changed the nature of work in general. So agriculture was the subsistence strategy, but when the Industrial Revolution came around, people focused time and energy and innovation and research into how do we build a machine that can make food production easier. It can take the place of human participation, daily nitty-gritty elbow grease kind of participation in producing your food. How can we make a machine do the work of 20 people, for instance? And so that's how the second agricultural revolution happened, when those machines that were invented that focused on agricultural purposes, focused on agricultural jobs, when those machines were invented and became widespread in agricultural circles, more people could leave the farm and get work elsewhere. So when you're looking at this demographic transition model that we have referred to and studied so often in class so far, you would be looking at stage 3 and stage 4 of that demographic transition, and the way that the population increases, the birth rate goes down, the death rate goes down, population increases and kind of stabilizes in the 4th stage of that demographic transition. And that's because of the Industrial Revolution. It made it possible to produce a whole bunch of food and support huge numbers of people the likes of which Thomas Malthus never imagined. He didn't live a long life enough to see how the agricultural revolution that coincided with the industrial revolution was going to make a boom in food production and really not cause the population bomb that he predicted in his work. Well, fast forward to about the 1940s, 50s, 60s. In that era, in the 20th century, you started seeing science. And so now we're down here on the board behind me, my messy handwriting. It looked better when I was writing it. Now I see it on the board behind me. It's a little messy, but let me tell you what it says. So the third agricultural revolution, which I have abbreviated here, that's what we are talking about when we use the phrase the Green Revolution. Green, not because it's necessarily climate friendly. Green, not because it's, energy efficient or doesn't use fossil fuels. Not green in that way, but green because science created a situation in which we could take fields that had never been able to grow anything before and modify the soil so significantly, modify the seeds that were planted so significantly that the yields boomed. Places that were never able to have crops before because of a lack of water, no irrigation, maybe pests were too much of a problem, fungus was too much of a problem, some kind of disease in the plants was too much of a problem. The Green Revolution is the science boom of agriculture, where you take a genetic profile of the kinds of crops that you want to use that are staple crops for a society, or staple crops maybe for animals that are produced in a society, or maybe for energy sources that are produced in a society. So you take the seeds, you take the pests, you take the soil, you take all of this into a lab, and through scientific research and innovation, you figure out how to increase the green, increase the growth of that plant, increase the places on the earth where that plant can grow, increase the fertilizer in the soil, increase the herbicide, or decrease. A lot of times the Green Revolution decreased the amount of herbicide that was necessary or pesticide that was necessary on a field, for instance. And so what happened was this science and the Green Revolution, it changed seeds into something that you could patent. Like, I'm talking about a trademark, I'm talking about a copyright, something that you can register with the government of ownership, this special thing. And so you end up with corporations like Monsanto that are really huge in agriculture. You end up with individuals like Bill Gates, who is buying up a ton of agricultural land, not only in the United States, but around the world. And these people have patents on certain types of crop production so that they have a certain particular genetic signature so that they are designated as their personal intellectual property. This crop, the genetic signature of this crop becomes their intellectual property that you cannot participate in. You can't get your hands on some of these seeds and use them in your own garden because that is not your property. That is something that Monsanto owns, or that this particular community farm, corporate farm owns, and it's their sole property. And so the science that is devoted to agriculture during the Green Revolution focuses on mass production, focuses on a boom of surplus, focuses on processing foods in a way that can preserve them for longer periods of time, focuses on processing foods in a certain way that we don't even end up with anything that's edible. We end up with something like ethanol from corn, or you can even make ethanol from sugar cane and different things like this. So instead of all of the crops being produced for human consumption, or crops being produced as chicken feed, or some kind of animal feed or something because humans are going to eat those animals, this kind of mass production is a huge boom in the economic structure of agriculture also. And so it changes the playing field, really. You're not focused on, is there enough food for people to eat? There's plenty of food for people to eat. There's so much food for people to eat that some of us are eating ourselves into diabetes and heart disease and all kinds of other health problems because we have so much food around us that we indulge in. On the flip side, there's so much food around, but has never been a larger percentage of the population globally who are dying from malnutrition, starvation, not having safe water to drink, and these kinds of issues. And so we have a whole bunch of social problems that are created based on this mass production of the food supply. So I've got some words on the board behind me, just kind of categories or topics that you need to investigate in your textbook when you're reading this section in chapter 11 from the Green Revolution on out. You'll read toward the end of the chapter some sections on different climates around the world. You'll see climate maps and where certain things grow the best. California, for instance, is a wonderful place to grow lots of different crops, and because of the Green Revolution, they are able, for instance, to produce strawberries year-round. The season of the year, because of the Green Revolution, doesn't matter so much anymore because you can modify the environment enough and modify the seeds enough so that maybe they are resistant to drier climates, cooler climates, different times of the year when they will ripen and this kind of thing. You can modify the genetic makeup of a plant to do that. You can always get 24/7, 365 days a year. You can go into a Kroger or a Walmart or something and find avocados, even though they are not in season in Arkansas. I don't even really know anybody who has successfully grown them in a large quantity in Arkansas, maybe just one on your own little personal tree. But you can always find hundreds of them in a store. And so that's another thing that the Green Revolution did, is it enabled us to transport crops hundreds of thousands of miles from the place where they naturally could grow, but now they are helped along by the science behind growing them in mass quantities. And this phrase GMO that I have on the board behind me, this abbreviation, genetically modified organisms, that's often how big corporations like Monsanto create these patentable seed varieties. They go in and perhaps if there was a variety of corn, for instance, that was particularly susceptible to corn blight, that's not what it's called, I can't remember the stuff, smut. I think it's called corn smut. It's a fungus that grows on corn. The fungus happens to be like any other edible mushroom. It's edible, but you can't use that corn in ethanol production if it gets corn smut on it. And so, for instance, Monsanto and other corporations have genetically modified the chromosomes in a corn kernel, a seed, so that corn smut can't grow on it anymore. You can genetically modify seeds, so wheat, for instance, so that you can spray something like Roundup, which is a mass herbicide. That means it kills plants. If you genetically modify a plant so that Roundup doesn't kill it, you can spray Roundup all over that field and it'll kill everything else, so that only the wheat or only the soybeans or only the whatever crop it is thrives and the pest plants die. And so there's a genetic modification that you can do. Some people love genetic modifications. You will hear one of the videos that I have curated for you talks about what are GMOs and how should we think about these things. And while the narrators are not entirely happy that GMOs exist, they basically say it's better that they're around instead of, certain crops going extinct or not having availability like we do. And so we have a lot more access to plants and other crops that we never would if GMOs didn't exist. And then from a flip side, another video that you will watch has a lot of terrible and horrible things to say about this corporate structure for agriculture. It uses a Marxist point of view that looks at the haves and the have-nots, with the corporations controlling the food supply, damaging the climate, damaging soil, damaging the health of the people who eat these things that are genetically modified organisms, damaging populations of animals. Some of you might have heard about or even know a lot yourself myself about the shortage or the blight of the honeybee. I don't necessarily think that we are still in the same kind of danger we were about 15 years ago when people stopped seeing honeybees at all. You see their populations in nature growing more these days than they had. But when honeybees started to become scarce and you didn't see them across the landscape, a lot of folks pointed to GMOs, pointed to climate change, pointed to the pesticides that people broadcast across crops in order to get rid of detrimental insects. Well, those pesticides don't just kill the insects that are bad, they kill everything. They kill your ladybugs and your praying mantises and all of your other things that are good natural predators of the bad ones. It kills everything, including those honeybees, for instance. And so there's a lot of argument about how wonderful the Green Revolution is and has been in agriculture. And there's a lot of argument about how terrible it has been for populations of people in the world, for the economic structure of people in the world, the climate of the globe, the soil composition and texture, because all of these things that are built in a laboratory, the argument is that they work against the natural processes like a simpler way of life requires in order to be fruitful enough to prosper. Horticulture and subsistence agriculture don't use things like Roundup or genetically modified organisms. Horticulture and subsistence agriculture, if you have grasshoppers come through and start eating all of your wheat, then your wheat just goes bye-bye. You better find another way to feed yourself that year. Maybe the grasshoppers themselves, you can collect them and eat them perhaps as an alternative to your wheat supply for that year because they've eaten everything. And so there are a lot of advantages for this green revolution, but there's a lot of arguments and people with very loud voices who don't like it. So I've tried to present you with a couple of curated videos that offer a variety of points of view so that you can consider them along with the information in your textbook and kind of solidify your stance on which side of the fence that you would fall on in this topic. Okay, so I hope you enjoy the curated videos and please text me with questions. I will see you next time.